some positive developments finally. I want to talk about those.
Okay, let's talk about positive developments.
Get your guys' thoughts on those. Well, first of all, let's talk about, I saw a headline earlier with Vanetta. I didn't get to hear the conversation. FTX reboot. What do you guys think?
Complete garbage. There's no such thing. Yeah.
Why?
There's no such thing as a reboot. Why would anybody, like, fool me once, but fool me twice? Like, I mean, who the hell would ever, the only FTX reboot would ever be just to salvage assets? I mean, to sell it, whatever. There's no such thing. There's no customer that should ever be allowed to put a dime into FTX. Reboot.
What if they take some of the Trump advice, rebrand? It's not called FTX, but think about it, right? So
no, there's nothing. You have to. It's not even toxic. It's criminal. Just forget about it. Just like, what customer anywhere in the world would commit 1 penny to FTX? You got to be out of your mind.
All of the customers that are owed some money.
Okay, well, if you're owed money, yeah, whatever. But that's, like, nobody knew ever. It's just crazy. It's crazy to even think about it.
Well, I would argue, what's wrong with FTX? Is it the platform, the technology, or was it the business?
What's wrong with any company that's ever gone bankrupt due to fraud? Would you buy? Would you do business with Enron? Like, no. I mean, like, what kind of question is that?
Well, I think the exchange itself, what FTX is, where people participated, the business, hell of an exchange. I think people had a great trading experience.
Really?
The technology.
Really?
What it offered.
And once you look under the covers and you recognize what a scam the whole thing was, that technology wasn't worth.
Well, yeah,
wasn't it?
Wasn't worth anything.
If someone that runs it or owns it steals all the money, that's one thing. But that shouldn't detract from.
Yes, it should, because then it's basically saying that technology doesn't friggin' work. Okay. It was just set up with so many back doors in it. How could anybody ever do business with FTX or some company name? The idea of an FTX reboot is simply to get
you said the name?
Some value out of the assets that they haven't sold yet. Like, they're still shopping around, different clearing platforms. They're still shopping around, like, different trust platforms they have. I know, like, a group that we work with is bidding for 1 or 2 pieces of their, bankruptcy sale. There's no freaking way. That is the biggest bunch of FTX should destroy the name, bury it, and put it in the same place as other. It's one of the biggest scams. It's basically Enron, Bernie Madoff, FTX. FTX can be above it all.
Yeah. Well, in terms of certainly in terms of the size. If I'm a creditor, though, I think it's interesting.
You're a creditor of who?
Of FTX.
Well, of course you think it's interesting because they owe you money. But for anybody else,
but it seems like a pretty viable path. So they've been able to locate, let's say, $7 billion of the 8+ or whatever, right? If you have an equity stake in this and you're using it, and more people are using it, and you can make the money back. Well, that's an interesting proposition. I think people are in favor of that.
Make the money back where? They're an illegal exchange. They're not. There's nothing.
I think people use this exchange again. I think a reboot, a repackage, all wounds heal over time.
No.
Yes.
No. Never, ever, ever. That's why I talked about it this morning. That's why companies like Pan Am never come back, or EF Hutton, or all these bankrupt companies that are they're garbage. Yeah. It's never, ever coming back. If anybody puts money, if FTX does come back and somebody relaunches it and somebody puts money in there, you deserve to lose everything you have.
Yeah. Well, what I guess somewhat related to that, what's also been interesting is just everything that's come out with the most recent report. When you look at how much money was being sent where, certainly there were a lot of suspicions initially, but what they've confirmed is just wild. How they were using this as really
it was their own piggy bank. Yeah. It's the whole thing is criminal and it's disgusting and I hope they all go to jail for a long time.
So you think it's going to be reopened in some way?
I think it'll
be bought. There'll be something. It'll come. It'll be to life.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 0%.
You think the U.S. regulators are? You think if FTX opens somewhere, it's going to open in Cyprus?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it'll be, and you won't be able to the idea that anybody in the U.S. will be able to touch it is zero.
Yeah, I agree. But the exchange could still come back, and majority of those customers weren't U.S. residents.
Sure.
Which
so
doesn't
fine.
make any difference.
So fine, they open it up in Cyprus or not even Bermuda, but what? I don't even know.
Well,
Yeah.
SBF was taking all the money. I don't know if it can get any worse than that.
Well,
we've got to
yeah,
find
but-
somebody better to run it.
Of course, but it's done. They're done. The whole thing. The biggest news in crypto the last week is essentially that you're starting to see now the move towards all the legit players, the so-called legit players, and they are. They're all
You talking
going,
about products or
yeah, they're all going
companies?
in the direction of the various the Bitcoin ETFs and all that kind of stuff. I think that's the real validation of the space. But I think that the space has to be broader. It can't just be Bitcoin and ETH. It has to be broader.
So you think ultimately we need some clarity around other tokens, whether they are or aren't securities? Because I don't think, a lot of times people look at this and say, oh, if it's categorized or classified as a security, that's a negative thing. Not necessarily. There's a path forward. But is that what you're referring to, that we need more, at least in the U.S., regulatory clarity?
All I'll say is that I feel like a lot of this is also has to come down to the blockchains themselves, because I feel like that the blockchains, because these are mostly technology geniuses that built these blockchains, they have essentially washed their hands of the trading side of the business, like the liquidity side of the business, and you can't build a business and expect somebody else to do all your dirty work. And so it's very hard for firms like Tasty or just firms that we deal with. Maybe it's Robinhood, Tasty, Interactive Brokers. I'm just thinking of the firms that offer crypto. Webull, TradeStation. There's about 5 or 6 U.S. brokerage firms that offer crypto. You cannot throw it on U.S. brokerage firms to take the heat for you guys. You're a technology firm, but you got to get dirty with everybody else and make your case, because it's not fair to try to let us. We have basically no revenue. You guys make billions of this, we make nothing, and it makes no sense for us to take all the heat and have to fight with the regulators to be able to offer your products. You got to fight for it. You got to fight for shelf space, just like anybody else. If you build something and want to put it in the supermarket, you got to fight for shelf space. These guys have to fight for shelf space, and they're definitely not. So I feel like it's incumbent upon the different blockchains to get their acts together to help us in the fight with the regulators, whether that means they finance it or do whatever. And then I think it's firms. Obviously, we're getting closer to some legitimacy with more exchanges that are, more recognized exchanges like EDX and the CBOE and then all these players in the ETF space. But it's got to be bigger than just Bitcoin and ETH. It's got to be.
So let me ask you that. In the U.S., do you think ultimately the bigger driver is Coinbase wins in this battle against the SEC, or in some sense in this war against the politicians?
Nobody wins against the SEC, but yes, I do think that Coinbase comes out. I think that Gensler has it's going to be very difficult for him to protect his position, or he's going to be to protect the position in court. I think it's going to be very difficult. Is
that more important for crypto than the broader institutional adoption that we've started to see signs of?
No, I think it's not more important, but it's just, the problem with crypto is that it's a technology, and until people start to understand it's a technology, I don't know how do you make the case,
right?
But clearly I think the price move the last couple of weeks and the validation from BlackRock, State Street, all the big firms that have jumped into the ETF game, Van Eck, everybody else, I think that's really helpful, and obviously the price reflects that. So I think that it's just a question of getting the space broader, because none of us just want to be stuck with four choices for customers.
Right.
How can you have a digital asset space, when basically there's 4 products, Bitcoin Cash, ETH, and Litecoin, that have been accepted as that we can trade as securities and nothing else.
Yeah, you really have this bifurcation of the market.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the EDX exchange that's come out and is, in a sense, stamped given the stamp of approval, I suppose, around, as you mentioned, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and Ethereum, and that's really it. So maybe there's an opportunity for others like a Coinbase that want to take that risk, certainly higher risk, higher reward. But for everybody, it's really now become more of this Bitcoin versus crypto, in my opinion. And you've seen that in terms of how it's trading. Do you think that continues, or do you think that some of these other tokens, regardless of whether you've been denied access at some places, do you see them catching up, or is it going to be a continuation?
I don't know how they catch up.
Okay.
That's the problem. But I also don't think that people will. I think the business is going to lean towards more on the trust. There's going to be trust. Everybody's going to go get trustee licenses and things like that. And I think what's going to ultimately happen is that people are still going to use cash Bitcoin and cash ETH, and they're not going to use these ETF products, because I think that people that trade Bitcoin don't care about ETFs. What we learned is that people that trade Bitcoin don't care about Bitcoin futures. They don't trade it. Yeah. They don't care about ETH. They don't care about Ethereum futures. They care about the cash. So I think it's a cash business. From a brokerage firm perspective, we don't make any money on digital assets. So why are we fighting so hard? Except that we believe in the technology.
So is it fair to say you think an ETF would be less impactful than maybe the market is starting to get excited about at this point? Or
I think it's very strong validation, but I think that you need consumer participation. That's what got everybody excited about digital assets, and exchanges like EDX and things like that. They are geared towards institutions, not to consumers. No consumer can trade on there yet.
Right.
There are no consumer connections. So, I feel like this space has gotten really lean, and it's going to get really better. But I kind of feel the direction of the future is going to be through. I know a lot of people think the direction of the future is going to be through staking, but that's really going to be impossible to do at firms like Tasty and Interactive Brokers and Robinhood. I just don't think any of these firms can take the regulatory risk. I just think it's impossible, and so I think that. The future.
Because it's not your battle to fight, you're saying?
It's not our battle to fight, and it's not worth it. So you're going to make
not your business.
You're going to make $50,000 in fees and pay an $8 million fine. Like, it's a stupid trade for us. But and every firm's going to look the same way. And then so then the other choice is where is the interesting part? If it's not staking it, it's probably going to be. I think it's going to be in the digital wallet space.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be in the money transfer side of the digital wallet space, and it's I don't know whether that's what that looks like. If it's some kind of coin, if it's some kind of I'm not sure how it replaces international, but it has to replace, to a certain extent, it has to replace current money transfers maybe it's some form of stable coin, maybe it's some crypto asset, but being able to move assets via a digital wallet to me is going to be the key.
Well, quick Tasty Crypto plug, as everyone hopefully knows. We've been building a self-custody solution, digital asset wallet. Go download it, and please let us know your feedback. That said, I agree, Tom. I think.
How far are we away from transfers in?
I heard a rumor that they were being tested.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of that demo. You might know more than me. But
I don't know.
We're close.
I don't know more than you, but I talked to Scott about it. He said we're really close.
Awesome.
So I think that is going to be a real test for Tasty, is if we can let people, especially like. I ran into 1 million people in Europe that were like,
well, the U.S. is so far behind on this crypto, don't you?
We're not behind. We have regulators that are
tomato.
They're blocking us. I know, but we're not behind technology-wise. We're just getting blocked.
Okay, well, we can't use the technology we have, which makes us fall behind in the race, don't you think?
Well, we can't use the technology, but we're building it anyway. So because we're assuming that the regulatory environment is going to change. So Ryan, what I think's, the people I ran into, everybody's like, I want to fund my account, but I basically don't want to pay, Apex 1 or 2%. I don't want to pay JP Morgan or, Bank of America or HSBC, whatever it is. I don't want them scraping. By the time I get my money over to the US, I'm down 3%. and it would be so simple just to use digital assets because you can have your money in your account. Plus, you have to wait 3, 5, 7 days. This way, you have your money in your account in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's coming. Whether we get there the
totally agree.
month or the next 6 months or year or so, I think you're going to see.
But isn't that like a really big part of the puzzle, big part of the equation?
It is. That use case, the utility that's provided. I think there's a lot of value there. But then, is the SEC coming for stablecoins? Is the SEC coming for DeFi? Coming for everything? Because those fees that you've mentioned, well, someone's making a lot of money on the other side of that, and those banks seem to have a lot of power. Do you think that the SEC will continue to be a headwind for the adoption of what we're describing in the U.S.? Or is this it? Is it just, hey, these bad actors, we've got egg on our face following FTX, we've got to clean this all up, and Coinbase is the last, Binance is the last, and now we're...
No, I actually think, and I've thought this all along, and I'm kind of pissed at myself for not taking advantage of it, exploiting it, because I've been super bullish in Coinbase, and especially when I got down to the low 50s on all the bullshit news, and I'm not long it now. I'm actually a little bit short it, and I'm mad at myself because Coinbase is the one that's going to come out of this thing as the huge winner. Crypto.com's got a lot of work left to do. Binance is in deep doo-doo. FTX is never coming back. Kraken's never going to be back in the U.S. And the only player that's legit in that entire space is Coinbase, and they can dominate the whole world in that particular space. Now, the other firms like Tasty, Robinhood, IB, those kind of firms, we'll pick at their ankles because we have limited, we have a different form of registration that limits us. We have too much to lose. Like they have no choice. But we have too much to lose. We have to wait until the regulators actually turn everything around, so we can pick at their nibble away. But we're going to use this as a money thing, and I think it's going to be really good.
Well, let's talk about, I want to jump back to the ETF really quickly, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Because I think this is huge. I think this is one of the biggest.
I don't think the ETF is huge. I think it's a huge validation, and I think it's important, but I don't think that people are going to trade the ETFs. Bitcoin is not going to be like Ryan Grace or Tony Batista are not going to go out and go, oh, I'm going to buy a Van Eck, Bitcoin and pay those guys. I mean, do you really want to pay them 50 to 100 basis points to manage your Bitcoin portfolio? I don't.
I don't want to pay anybody.
I don't want to pay anybody. I'm going to buy it myself. The only difference is they're going to be leverage. I assume they're going to be marginable, so that's good. But I just think that like the average consumer, like if I think about my son, for example, who likes to buy and sell, digital assets on, whether it's on Tasty or Coinbase, wherever platform or some platform over in Europe, who knows? There's no chance he's buying a mutual fund or an ETF. No chance.
I agree, and I think that is true for Tasty traders, Tasty Nation, ourselves, as you mentioned.
You say no chance that your son buys.
No. Buys an ETF. He's 100% going to buy Bitcoin straight up. He's never going to buy it. Never, ever. None of these kids are. They're never going to do it.
Completely agree.
Oh my God. They go to conventional or regular firm where...
But they're never going to go. That's not what they do.
Unless they're entrepreneurs. If they go work for McDonald's...
The only way they're going to buy Bitcoin...
That's the only...
The only way they're going to do it is in a 401k when they have no choice.
Right, exactly.
That's fine. Who cares?
Right,
There's no choice.
right,
That's the only way. Right. That's the only way is in a 401k when you have, and there'll be a Bitcoin fund, and you'll say, okay, I'll do that.
And that is huge. That's so massive, right?
Nah.
I'll look at it this way, right? This is a $500 billion asset when we just look at Bitcoin. 52% of the market today, as we've got up on the screen. It's tiny, though. We've gone through these presentations. Hey, could it get to gold? 11 trillion in terms of its overall market cap.
It's a dinky little asset.
Tiny. Yeah. And now you've just connected this massive pipe. If it gets approved, and there's some
what
things we can talk about there. The ETF flow.
Oh please! What the hell? Did you know how much?
Tom,
that's the same. That's the same argument they used to make with cannabis. It's not huge. It's nothing.
Cannabis hasn't yet had the catalyst in terms of.
Okay, listen. I'm telling you, it's nothing. That's not what's going to. All it's doing is validating the space. It's important for it to validate the space, but nobody's going to trade those.
Let's say I'm a professional investor sitting on top of a massive pool of money. I'm an institution.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And from a portfolio diversification perspective,
sure, you can buy
return
some
profile, I want this thing,
Great.
right?
You go buy some of the Van Eck fund and you put your $100 million into it. Who cares? That's not going to have any impact on the market. I'm just saying this market feeds off speculative emotion and momentum, and that is the future of digital assets.
I agree. For sure on the margin, that's where I think gets you to the crazy prices, and obviously that's how it trades on both sides. But when you think about where's that base, where's that kind of fair value, I don't think we've seen that yet because we haven't necessarily seen that huge flow or wave of capital from the institutions because of how much friction is associated with that. Sure, let's say that BlackRock gets approved and they've got this ETF and they charge 1% or 75 bips or whatever it might be. There's still very little friction for capital to flow into that from these massive pools of money that want that portfolio kind of that factor exposure, right? And I think that once you see that, that's where we then go in terms of the new all-time highs, or that's what gets you to that six-figure price. So if you're bullish on Bitcoin, I think you've got to be extremely excited about this. And I'll just use the gold comparison. So the GLD ETF, it's been around for a long time, has close to 60 billion in assets in it. And I would argue that for most, as we move forward, Bitcoin at these levels, given how small it is a much more attractive investment than gold. Gold could have some upside, but I don't think it's anywhere near what the upside is in crypto.
Okay.
Right?
We agree 1,000% on that. I mean, you're going to get people are going to say that gold has a fundamental intrinsic value, and that Bitcoin does not have any intrinsic value, and digital assets have no intrinsic value. So you're going to get that argument from a lot of people. But
it's a fair argument.
No, it isn't, because at least not in my opinion. Because
well, I got a catalytic converter that got stolen. I would tell you differently, but go ahead.
because you don't know what the intrinsic value of that technology is going to be a couple of years from now.
Sure.
So you're right. I agree with you. I'd much rather own digital assets than gold. No question about it.
I agree with you too, but I'm just saying it has. You're talking about intrinsic value. Yeah. Gold has intrinsic value.
Okay, for why?
What's that?
Why? Because you could melt it down and
because of the Incas.
The Incas.
Of course.
All right, Ryan, we're out of time. All right. You've got us off at a tangent, but it was good. You got us all fired up today.
Awesome. Well,
I wanted to see a gentleman's bet between you two to see if
No, we're on the same team.
Okay.
Not on FTX though.
Not on FTX. That's what I was talking about. That's where I was going.
I like 50 delta on this FTX thing.
50 delta on FTX?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I would sell it till my hands.
Well, if you get to 60, let me know. I'd like to make a little gentlemanly bet between the two. You got a lunch or something.
Because look, I think maybe it's not used or it isn't successful. I think it gets relaunched.
Who cares? Everything gets, because there's always grifters out there. Okay, I mean, the name's probably worth something. Who knows? The
name isn't worth anything. No.
Okay, I'm telling you, you're talking about WeWork. Just so you know.
Still here.
It is still here. Yes, it's like 20 cents, but it's still
barely.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick 90-second break and come back. We got more Tasty Live coming up next with a market measure. We'll be back in 90 seconds.